Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Jennifer Mealy, Chief Communications Officer and Managing Director of Evangelization of the Diocese of Greensburg.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Mealy. Thanks for joining us this Sunday, as tomorrow we are getting ready to celebrate Memorial Day. I thought it would be a great way to recognize Memorial Day by bringing in two very famous people in Westmoreland County who actually have a lot to celebrate on Memorial Day, and they are Colonels Nancy and Chuck Anderson. Thank you both for joining us today.
Oh, our pleasure.
It's great to be here, Jen.
Oh, you guys have done so much for Westmoreland County. We appreciate all of your service and your leadership, but I think this is an opportunity for us to step back and say, tell us where it all began. So Nancy, let's start with you. Tell us about where you grew up and how you made the decision for your vocation to go into the military.
Oh, well, actually, my situation is pretty unique in that I'm a Marine Corps brat. My father started his Marine Corps career after a Paris Island boot camp on Iwo Jima and fought Iwo Jima, Korea, Vietnam. But my parents were married in 1950, and I came along 11 months later at Quantico, Virginia, and actually started kindergarten at Quantico, Virginia. Quantico, Virginia, the Marine Corps base Quantico, Virginia, is the crossroads of the Corps. It's where all the Marine Corps schools are. They're advanced school. All officer candidates train there. All officers train there. All staff, non-commissioned officers trained there. It really is a crossroads. So people come back to Quantico. So my dad had 3 tours there. So I was born there, started kindergarten there during Daddy's second tour, and graduated from Quantico High School. And it was very unique at the time because, all of the other dads had worked, certainly they had all been to Vietnam, fought in Vietnam, but almost every single one back then, we're talking the mid-60s, had fought during the Second World War, certainly in Korea. And so we had our own hometown heroes. And Quantico was so unique in that was the one base, because it was a base, it wasn't like an operational unit, where Dad came home every night at supper time. And mom and dad, your moms and dads would root at the football games. They'd root at the basketball games. And it was a very different reality. In fact, my high school, Quantico High School, was part of the Department of Defense education system. We were ranked number 5 in the nation among private schools in the 60s. Almost all of my teachers all of them had a master's, but most of them had a PhD in the 60s. And very unlike Quantico, Virginia, we were integrated. And so we had the chance to really learn a lot. There were 5 people in my advanced calculus class. There were 7 people in my physics class. You really got a tremendous education. But also we got the education from our parents because of what our fathers had done and what our mothers, who, although they were almost exclusively housekeepers, domestic engineers, I call them, when our dads went overseas, either to Vietnam or some other overseas posting, the moms ran the household and did so very well. They did everything. If something broke, they got it fixed. They did all the yard work and those kinds of things. And so, when you have those kinds of parents, well, several things happen. First, you know all about hospital corners. Even in high school in the 60s, when you think of kind of the hippie crowd. Shoes were polished, hair was neat and trim. Our desks, certainly our bedrooms were all squared away. So it was a very different reality than what the world was going through. Quantico, Virginia is just about 21 miles from Washington, D.C. In 1968, the riots were exploding in Washington, D.C. And certainly things were just very savage during the Vietnam War, but it just was not like that at Quantico. And so when we get together, in fact, last fall, Chuck and I actually went to my high school reunion. And you just see all these world beaters because our parents were world beaters. They taught us that you have to have a sense of purpose. You have to be responsible for your actions. And so it was very rewarding seeing that from our parents. and for us to pass on to our own children and grandchildren. Now, our 3 children are world beaters. We moved 10 times during my dad's career, but we moved 19 times during my career. And so you learn to be very flexible, to adapt. When the kids walk into a room, they take it over. Nothing phases them. They're all gypsies, just like Chuck and I are. And those kinds of examples that you have from your parents and that you can pass on to your children and grandchildren, invaluable life lessons.
And then, so you're graduating from high school and you already know this is my vocation. This is what I'm going to do.
Absolutely not. I was going to be a Sister of Mercy.
Really?
Absolutely. And, but they got rid of the habits. Not really. But I was actually, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to Virginia Tech. And so I was there. I was studying chemistry and physics and with a minor in math. But my father died at when he was 48. I was 19 years old. I just finished my freshman year at Virginia Tech. And I'm the oldest of 4. And when Daddy had just retired 10 months before from the Marine Corps, and that when the member passes away, your retirement pay stops. So my mother with 4 children, in fact, I'm 10 and a half years older than my youngest sister, was now living on Social Security. So I really felt that I needed to help support my mother. So I was, rather than being, a high school teacher or becoming a Sister of Mercy, but that was the first choice. The high school teaching came after I went to college. I said, I need a job. I need one that pays equal pay for equal work. And I need to travel because I'm used to traveling. And so I looked at the military, and the Marine Corps is by far the smallest of the services. But with that comes the fact that you have a responsible job at a very junior rank. A young private first class, the private first class, lance corporal, sergeant, a private first class is in charge of 3 other people. So this young 18-year-old has 3 people working for him or for her. My first job as a brand new second lieutenant, I was in a major's billet. And so you just learn, and the Marine Corps teaches you about leadership. You learn to care for your troops and for one another. That's just part of the 6-month basic training that goes to creating a Marine Corps officer. And so that was right up my alley.
So then you just progressed and for
30 years. Yeah.
30 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But also that I was in from 72 until 2002. And that whole generation, so many changes occurred for women. The draft ended in 1973. Of course, women have always been an all volunteer force, but the economy was picking up. People were leaving. Vietnam was winding down. And so all of a sudden, the military, the services were looking for people. And so that was during that 1973, 74, that the late 70s, mid to late 70s, when opportunities really opened up for women and for other minorities as well. And so, but I just loved it. I love the challenge. I love the fact where the Marine Corps is also the most demanding physically of the services. And so that's when I started running, because that's just what you had to do to stay in shape. Also, our uniforms are so expensive that you don't dare gain a pound. and so just started enjoying running. And when Chuck and I met and married, he loved to run as well. And in fact, she's on Sundays after Mass, we would run at least 8 miles to the Dunkin' Donuts, buy a dozen donuts for he and I and the kids, and run back home and actually eat, not the dozen, but we would have donuts as part of Sunday brunch.
Well, I guess if you're burning all those calories, what does it matter?
Yeah, we did. And when you're 24, it's so much easier to burn those calories than it is when you're 71.
So definite message for women, if this is something that they're thinking about, if they are physical, if they are strong mentally, this could be a great career for them.
I think an even greater career now, because as of 1 January 2016, there are no combat restrictions. Beginning in 1948, President Truman, who brought women in as a regular part of the services. We'd all been reserves before during the First World War and the Second World War. The women did such a great job, especially during the Second World War, where you had about 360,000 women serving. They realized that there was an important role to be had for women, but there were restrictions back then, which I can talk about later. But now in 2016, all combat restrictions were eliminated. That means it's now really the best person for the job. And to their credit, the services have not lowered their physical standards. They've raised the mental standards. And so it's a great opportunity for women.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Chuck, this is your wife, fellow colonel, definitely a military family. So I'm interested to hear a little bit about how you grew up and how you made the decision. But we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Welcome back to Westmoreland Community Connections on WHJB. I'm your host, Jennifer Mealy. I'm having a fabulous conversation today with Colonel Chuck and Nancy Anderson. I thought this was very appropriate for Memorial Day, and we'll share more about that in just a minute. But Chuck, let's hear about you. Where did you grow up, and how did you make this decision to commit your life to service?
Well, this is great, Jen. Thanks for having us here. But this is a love story, really. I started off in Greensburg. I was born here in Greensburg and lived over in Southwest Greensburg went for my elementary school at Welby Street School, and then then we moved to Hempfield Township, and I started Hempfield High School in 1956, and we started at the bottom of the hill at Harold, and then for the last 3 years moved up the hill and graduated from high school in 1960. And of course, my family had Anderson's Market. My grandfather started it in 1906, and then he ran it through World War II. And then my father took over after he came back from the Navy after World War II. But everybody worked in the store. I worked in the store. My mother worked in the store. My sister worked in the store. Everybody did. And it was just it was the family. And my whole presentation when I was growing up was just the store. And I was going to be the next manager, owner, or whatever of Anderson's Market. So when I went to college at Waynesburg, I studied business administration, thinking I was going to come out and I was just going to go into the store and take over. And, that's going to be my life. It was all fixed. And then Vietnam broke out, and of course we still had the draft back then. And I remember sitting in my senior year down there doing a paper. I can't remember what the paper was on, but I was listening to the radio, and President Johnson was on there talking about the Tonkin raids and that whole resolution. And I thought to myself, I'm probably not going to the grocery store. I think I'm probably going to Vietnam. And sure enough, I got out, and my numbers were coming up on the draft. And I just graduated from college, so I figured, well, let me be proactive in this. And so I went into Pittsburgh, and I visited in the federal building in there the officer selection officers for all the services. I wasn't crazy enough to just go right into them. I wanted to see what they were all about. So. With Vietnam heating up, I went to the Army, and they took me out to breakfast. And the Air Force took me out for a cup of coffee. And the Navy took me out to lunch. And I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty cool. And so I, young guy, been there. And on the way out of the building, I saw a big Marine sticker on a door. And I said, well, yeah, I'm here. So I pushed the door open. And there was a Marine captain sitting in there with his feet up on the desk, blue trousers, red stripe. Mm-hmm. And he looked up over the magazine he's reading, and he said, what do you want? And I told him what the story was. He says, get out. He says, you can't be a Marine. And that was it. So I didn't want to be a Marine anyway. I left. I went back to school, and I'm finishing up everything I had to do down there. And it's might be a couple of weeks later. And it's the same captain standing on campus with a table with brochures. And I walked by him, and he said, hey, I know you. He says, come here a minute. It's a new month. It's a new quota. He needs me now. So I went over and he said, you got a minute? He says, we go upstairs and take a test. So I said, sure. So we went upstairs, we took the test, and he said, well, maybe you can be a Marine. And that was it. And it wasn't a great thing for going into the Marine Corps, but it was the best deal. And I could go to OCS, I'd become an officer right away, spend a couple of years in the Marine Corps, and do my duty and get out and have that behind me. And then I could go to the store. Well, I got down to Quantico, going to officer candidate school and thinking, what have I gotten myself into? And I got down there and I liked it. Who knew? I like the discipline. I like the structure. I like the physical aspects of it. And I mean, you're going to school, but you're also working yourself into just exhaustion every day. And you pop out the other end and become a second lieutenant, and you go to the basic school and you learn how to be a leader. And I mean, it was just an amazing program. So I did. I ended up in Vietnam. When I was in Vietnam in 67, 68. And I was an aviation supply officer. I was working with a bunch of aviators and basically, taking care of the needs and fixing airplanes and doing all those sorts of things. And I was at the largest jet group that the Marine Corps had ever had in combat at that point. And I was a defense platoon commander, on the lines at night and that sort of thing. And it was actually exhilarating. But also I'm working with a bunch of these aviators out there, and I'm thinking, man, these guys are doing, just exciting things. They're flying fast airplanes, or just amazing what they're just really on the front line. And I said, I was talking to a bunch of them, and I said, they told me how they got there, and I said, well, I can do that. So when I came home, I went to work in the store after I got out of the Marine Corps. I got out of the Marine Corps, still in the reserves, but still basically a civilian. And I went out to Latrobe Airport, and I learned how to fly because I'd never done it before. I wanted to see if I liked it, and I liked it just fine. It was wonderful flying little Cherokee Piper Cherokee 140s. And solo, did all the things that you do, and I said, "This is what I want to do." And I sat down with my dad and my grandfather and said, "Hey, I don't know. I think this is what I want to do."
How'd they take it?
They were fine. They were supportive. They understood. That was what it was. And so went to flight school and became a fighter pilot. And one got orders back to Cherry Point, and I was supposed to go fly A4 or F4s at that time, and they asked me if I would take a gap year and go fly OV-10s, twin engine turboprop, just a fun little airplane. And I never went back. I had the opportunity to do that, and basically spent my career flying OV-10s. And just great airplane, 4 internally mounted machine guns, every kind of ordnance you could possibly imagine. Had all the firepower on the wings or on the belly, and great fun airplane to fly. So, but as I progressed through my career, had various billets and got to fly everything we had. And during the first Gulf War, I was the operations officer for all of. Before I got that job, I ran aviation training for the Marine Corps. Anybody that touched Marine Corps aircraft, I trained you, whether you were a pilot, a mechanic, whatever you were. And my next job, I was going to be the operations officer for all the Marine aircraft in the Atlantic Fleet. It was going to be G3, second wing at Cherry Point. And on my way there, I knew there were helicopters there, and I'd never flown helicopters, but I owned the helicopter school. So I sent myself to helicopter school and carrier qualified in helicopters as well as jets. So when I got to the fleet, I could fly all the aircraft. So it was just absolutely amazing how it all worked out. And I was in from 65 until 92, and basically covered the world. You spin the world, stick your finger in it, and I've probably been there and doing interesting things. But it was a great way to spend your youth as a young man. 1,000 miles an hour, hair on fire. Going every place. And then I had Nancy, for support. And we met in Washington D.C. in 75.
August.
She agrees. Good. But it was I was a brand new major. Sent me to Washington from the fleet and to be on staff there at Headquarters Marine Corps. And back then, the Marine Corps Command Center basically ran the Marine Corps at night. Everybody's asleep. This is before the internet, before cell phones, before all the stuff that we have today. And so I had to know where all the generals were in case a commandant woke up in the middle of the night and wanted to talk to one of them. And if you were not in your base, you had to let me know where you were. Well, Nancy had a date with the aide for the commanding general of the 2nd Marine Aircraft Wing, and the aide came in to tell me where his boss was that night, and he brought Nancy with him. And I sent my gunnery sergeant over to take the information from the aide, and told Nancy that in order to be in this secure area, she needed to tell me her name, her address, and her telephone number, which she did. and there were a couple of weeks of begging and pleading, but finally I broke her down. She turned me down immediately when I called her, and then after that, I guess with wearing her down, it worked out. But anyway, we've been married for 46, 47 years now, something like that.
Yeah. It only seems like 50.
But it was a great. We've had a great run, and the Marine Corps has been really great to us.
Oh,
and
yeah.
As Nancy said, it's a great opportunity to educate yourself and to travel the world and to just have an interesting life.
But you've continued your life of service here in Westmoreland County. I mean, rattle off the boards, rattle off the positions.
Chuck's more the boards, although I've currently served on a state board and was just elected to work on a national board with the Secretary of Defense. But you just learn to serve with your hands. And that's what I like. That's the hospital auxiliary, volunteering at Excella Health, volunteering at the Red Cross for years. And in fact, that was one of my first paybacks because I was fortunate enough to be a base commander and a battalion commander during my career. And even today, 2022, if there's a death in the family or a birth, some major event, that active duty service member doesn't go anywhere without a Red Cross message.
Wow.
And so it's a 24-hour duty, service to the armed forces, where you're the one who talks to the doc, talks to the medics. You said, yes, he died. This is how he died. Yes, she died. And you're the one that generates through the National Red Cross that message that brings that young service member home. Sadly, it's almost always bad news. It's rarely good news.
And Chuck, you even held office here in Western Pennsylvania.
Well, we're still involved in the community. I'm on the National Board of Military Officers Association, and the largest, officers group that we have. Basically, a lobbying group for all the things that we've been promised over the years to make sure that we get it. And so that's 4 times a year in Washington, and actually this year for offsite we're going to be in Kansas City in October for a week of meetings and working with the Congress. Also, then the local boards. I'm on the Pitt Greensburg board, on the hospital. What is it? It's the
Westmoreland Foundation.
Oh yeah, that
Foundation.
The foundation, and then the Salvation Army. Just and Rotary Club. All those sorts of things that hold up the community. And of course, it was a great honor to be the county commissioner for 11 plus years.
Wow. Didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah. Well, it goes pretty fast.
Well, we have about 7 minutes left, so I want to specifically ask you about Memorial Day, because it's a time, when the whole country, similar to Veterans Day, where we're thinking about people who are no longer with us and people who have influenced us over the years. Is that a day that you think about your dad? And, what do you want people to know about Memorial Day and what it means to you?
I don't think so much about my father because he had a full career. And Memorial Day is when we honor those who didn't make it, who did fall in the line of duty. And one of the things that opens for me was Desert Shield, Desert Storm, where for the first time, because we had so many months of lead up time to bring the logistics tail into Saudi Arabia primarily, lots of women deployed for the very first time, and women died. And what the American public realizes that the loss of a woman isn't any greater than the loss of a son, the loss of a man. And so Memorial Day just lets me think how all of us, men and women, how much we owe to those. Only 10% of the current population is eligible to serve in the military. And so how fortunate we are to have these bright men and women who are willing to be Memorial Day people, who are willing to lie in those cemeteries. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think about.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And of course, when I grew up, all my uncles and my father, all participated in World War II, all were deployed, and I actually had two uncles went on either side of my mother's brother and my father's brother did not return. Both died. My grandmothers were, obviously devastated by all that, but they still, stood there and did what they needed to do to make it all happen. But it's we're later on today, most likely, or maybe tomorrow, we're going to go out to the cemetery and decorate it, and that's what we do. And all those people that are still buried in Greensburg, they're all put flowers on and stand and say a prayer, for those we've lost. And but I was a little kid when all that was going on, but I still remember it. I mean, it was very traumatic when the phone calls came in, and to see the people that you were taking care of you, all of a sudden were just overcome with grief. And then when the bodies actually came home, going to the cemetery for all that. But I'll tell you, I had great role models when, growing up, and with those guys that came back, and they all had stories to tell, and some of them would be very quiet about it. Others would talk. Mm-hmm. And it was those things that I remember, as a kid. And then, of course, when going to Vietnam, you'd be sitting and have breakfast with somebody, and you never see them again. They would just go away. And it was, and some of them you really didn't know what happened to them, or they would be captured and then they'd be prisoners of war. And so the whole, it's just so much, so much loss and so much sacrifice by so many people, and every one of those people that paid the ultimate price, has a string of people that go back, that it affects the fabric of the country. So it really is it's quite a progress, and it's just amazing that people step up and are willing to make those sacrifices to make this country what it is.
Well, you've both made your own sacrifices for us and for our country, Colonels Chuck and Nancy Anderson. This has been so touching and so moving, and I thank you both so much for joining me on Westmoreland Community Connections, and I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day.
Thank you.
Well,
this is great.
And thanks for joining us. Yes. This is great.
You're listening to WHJB. This is Westmoreland Community Connections. Thanks for joining us.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.